Releasing the little things. It's important to release the little things. Somebody asks you to take out the trash, and you don't feel like doing it, but you go ahead and do it anyways. Or maybe, there's lots of times in our life when people will ask us to do things or to have certain rules that we think are we just don't agree with them. But we don't think they're important enough to talk about and deal with, so we just go along, get along, go along. And that's fine if you actually then release what you're feeling. If your spouse asks you to take the trash out and you don't want to do it, but you get up and do it anyways, that's fine. You don't have to have a discussion about why you don't like her asking you to take the trash out, or why now is not a good time to take the trash out. You can if you want. But if you choose not to and you choose to go along, you still need to feel your feelings and release whatever emotions you have caught up and attached to that. Unfortunately, the majority of people don't do that, and then they harbor and build up, and they build up all these tiny little balls of aggression, and then they form a huge ball of aggression. And then before you know it, somebody asks you something and you just snap because you release the full force of 25 disagreements over one disagreement. Now, there is nothing wrong with the attitude of getting along to go along if you actually release it and you want to get along to go along. If somebody asks you to do something and you're like, it's not worth the effort, I'll just go ahead and do it, that's fine. But then you have to make sure that you center yourself and actually release that you are okay with doing it. And if you're doing something that you're not okay with, if deep down inside it does bother you, but you suck it up to do it anyways, you, in addition to having a lot more to release, those are things that you really need to talk about. Some issues need to be talked about at the moment. Some issues can be talked about later. But either way, whatever it is that you agree to do, you then need to relax, breathe, center yourself, and accept the fact that you agreed to do it. You have, another practitioner friend of mine was talking about, last night, the power of no. If you say yes to something, if you agree to do something, then you need to embrace it and accept it, that you agreed to do it. To say you do it and then in your mind mentally huff and puff and complain and start making a list of all the horrible things they've done to you and put upon you, you need to release those things. You need to release. You need to relax and release. And if what they're asking you to do is generating that kind of frustration in you, then you also need to, if you can't relax, release, and embrace the concept, then you need to have a conversation with them so that they can know how you feel. It's important that if you're doing little things, when somebody else asks you to and it's not necessarily what you wanted to do, that's fine. Get along, go along, release it. But release it. Don't hold on to it. Don't let it fester. Don't let it build up. And more importantly, since we're living in the now, or at least the goal is to be present in the now so that we're not letting autopilot. By the way, that's where I think for some people these things happen, is because they autopilot. They don't want confrontation, so they just go ahead and do it. But then they never feel it, realize it, and release it. And so it harbors. But if we're being in the now and then the present, then we need to release these emotions that we're carrying around in the back of our mind, because if we don't release them, then that keeps being brought into the present. If you didn't like taking the trash out yesterday, and you're asked to take the trash out today, in addition to what you're feeling in the now because you have an attachment that you haven't released, you're also bringing in yesterday into your present. And And what happens is the more things that you don't release and that you're carrying with you, pretty soon it's just exhausting just walking around, because you're carrying this huge bag of past actions that are attached to the present, because every time something happens, the trigger is switched, and all these things that you haven't released, all these things that you still feel an emotional attachment to in the past, all zoom right now. And so, like I said, if you don't release your attachment and you keep piling up these things, then all of a sudden, boom, you explode with the force of 25 or 30 arguments over taking the trash out. And if you released it, you wouldn't have that issue. Or more importantly, if it is such an issue that you're having all this attachment to it, then that's the time to sit down and talk. Release your end of it. You can have a talk with somebody and they may not change their expectations. That's their choice, because we can't control other people, but we can control how we react. And so when we need to talk about it, because we need to release, for our own good, we need to release what we're holding in. For our own good, we need to keep the past slate empty so that we can relax and enjoy today. Why are we spoiling today with past frustrations? Now, remembering the past in the sense of using it as a guide, like I remember at 10 o'clock every day she asked me to take the trash out, so you can remember that, but don't attach yourself to it. Don't invest anger, frustration, resentment. Release the list. Release the scorekeeping. And if you're in a point where you are having to keep a list or scorekeeping in your head, then talk to them. You need to break yourself out of that cycle. You need to look at what programs are firing, and are they serving you or not. Because sometimes get along to go along is fine if that's what you want and you're relaxed and in tune. But get along to go along doesn't work if you're not really getting along to go along. So don't let resentment harbor and fester. Don't let the anger of the past rob you of your energy and joy today. And worst of all, don't let the fear that tomorrow you're going to be angry about something dampen your joy for today either. Relax and release. Feel your frustration. Feel your anger. Feel it. And accept the fact that I chose to go along. I chose to take the trash out. I chose to wash the car. Accept that you are responsible for your actions, and you chose to do it, and accept that and release it. And in the future, when somebody asks you something, be present and think about, do I just want to do this? And if you do, that's fine. Embrace it, accept it, and do it. Or this is something we need to talk about, because this is not working for me. Then sit down and talk about it. If you need to talk about it then or talk about it later. But it's important to be aware that you get to choose what you do. You chose to take the trash out. You chose to wash the car. You chose to go grocery shopping. You could have said no, and if that's what you wanted to say and you didn't, then you chose to do something other than what you wanted to do. And so accept that and release the hostility, frustration, anger, or resentment, because you chose to do it. And if you choose to have a conversation about it, then choose to have the conversation about it. You have the power. You have the power to say no. You have the power to say yes. And you have the power to have a conversation and change the dynamic. So relax and breathe and know that it's okay. Whatever you decide to do is okay. So don't attach an emotional attachment to it. It's all right. You're all right.